Now, without further ado, we have three amazing panelists who are going to talk about chips and the future of technology, how $11 billion will fuel U.S. innovation on the research and development side. So our first panelist will be Dr. George White. He's the Senior Director for Strategic Partnerships and Principal Research Engineer at Georgia Tech. Dr. White oversees activities designed to facilitate teams of researchers in attracting external research funding, and he's also very strategic in bringing different groups together to secure funding to advance research, one of which is across the HBCU landscape. And we really appreciate him for this work. He earned his bachelor's degree in physics from Hampton University. He's a proud Hamptonite, and his PhD in metallurgy and material science from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And so he will be talking about the CHIPS and Science Act and really just getting us all up to speed. Dr. Frances Williams, she is the new, or relatively new, Vice President for Research and Sponsored Programs at Clark Atlanta University. She's also a professor in the Department of Cyber Physical Systems. She was previously the Chief Research Officer and Associate Vice President for Research and Sponsored Programs, and also a number of other titles at Tennessee State University. Her research area is in advanced materials and devices, semiconductor manufacturing, and nano and micro electromechanical systems processing and devices. Dr. Williams received a bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering from North Carolina A&T State University and a PhD in electrical and computer engineering from Georgia Tech. Our third panelist is Dr. Keith Hargrove. He currently serves as the Provost and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs at Tuskegee University. He also formerly served as Dean of the College of Engineering at Tennessee State University. In his current role as Provost and Chief Academic Officer, he is stewarding forward a strategic plan and he also enjoys supporting faculty and promoting continuous growth in research activity, as well as ensuring a rich student experience. His research interests and areas include systems engineering, design, virtual and augmented reality, advanced manufacturing, and engineering education. He received his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Tennessee State University as a General Ford Motors Fellow, his master's from the Missouri University of Science and Technology in Rolla, and he's also recognized as the first GEM Fellow, no idea, to obtain the PhD. He earned his PhD from the University of Iowa. So I'm really excited to have them here today. It's going to be informative. It's going to be great. And they will also share how you too can join in with the CHIPS. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Dr. White will be our first presenter. Dr. White?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I can't start my video because it says you cannot start video because the host has stopped it. So if you want me to, share my video, I need your permission. So let me see, can I do it? Yep. All right. So am I going to share my slides?
I can share them for you if you'd like.
No, I can do it. I can do it. So let me share my screen. And so let me make sure that you guys can see it. Can you guys see my screen?
We sure can. Are you able to put it in full screen mode?
Yes, I can. Let me do that to get it in full screen mode. Okay. Okay. Is that big enough or does it need to go bigger?
Bigger, full screen view.
Okay. All right. I don't know if, let's see. You can take that off. Okay. I don't know if I have it right or not. Let's see. Video.
It's under view.
Mm-hmm.
If it's the same slides you sent me, I can share my
Yeah, why don't you do that? Why don't you just go ahead and do it? Because some reason it's not doing what I'm needed to do. All right, D,
Can
I'm
you start?
gonna stop sharing.
Okay, wonderful.
All right, so if you can show the slides, that'll be good.
Sure.
All right.
There you go.
All
Looks
right,
good.
thank you. So, all right. So I'm going to talk to the CHIPS Act just in general and just kind of give you an overview, as it relates to what's going on, in the reshoring effort of semiconductors and semiconductor packaging, to the US. All right, so next slide. So basically the Chips for America vision, really have been borne out for the fact that, the US really needs to look at how we can actually secure our economic future as well as our national security. And so certainly the CHIPS Act, which is the piece of legislation, would actually do just that. And then also ensuring that we spur innovation, by increasing competitiveness and ensuring that we have leadership in this tech sector. The one concern, right, that has happened over the years is that, the semiconductor packaging manufacturing had been offloaded to Asia, all right? And at one point, the US actually fabricated, about 60, 70% of the semiconductors, in the world. That number now is at about 11%, with about 45% of that, being done in Taiwan. And so with all the threats that are out there being posed by China, this is one of the catalysts in terms of why this bipartisan piece of legislation was actually enacted. The next slide, please. So Dr. Washington talked about $11 billion in federal dollars that's available as it relates to the CHIPS Act. But that is only just for the R&D piece, right? There's also another 39 billion that's being made available to companies that are working potentially with universities. So, which brings the total amount of the funds that are available to $50 billion. And so a key component of this, is how do we provide the workforce of the future, right? Which is going to help bring these jobs back to the US. And so this money is being spread across multiple agencies, including DOD, NSF, Department of Commerce, and the like. Okay, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So last year, we started looking at, when will this actually roll out? So the bill was actually passed sometime in August of 2022. And so this, the slow release of funds is now starting to pick up. And so we've seen a number of those opportunities starting to creep up. I would say probably in the last couple of months or so. This was just some of the earlier dollars that were released back in February of last year, June and September. And so of 2023. And again, this was more for the incentives piece as it related to, building out capabilities, right, around the country. All right, we can go to the next slide. So what is the vision for success in this area? So there's going to be opportunities to develop leading edge logic chips. These are the chips that primarily a company like Intel, who you may be familiar with, that continues to fabricate. So what are we going to be doing in that area? And so again, there's a lot of incentives, for companies like Intel to actually build more fabs, here in the US. And when you build more fabs, you're going to need more engineers. And so there's opportunities, in that regard. And I think, later on in the talk, we're going to talk about how HBCU and the like can actually, be a part of this vision. Advanced packaging. Some of you all may or may not know, what packaging is, but packaging is very, very critical to the success of realizing a trusted module. You have the semiconductor, which is the chip, but then you have to be able to bring power, right, and other functions to the chip, like being able to cool the chip. And so this is what we mean when we start talking about packaging. And so packaging had been, lost. We kind of gave up on it way back when because it wasn't a true value add. But as we start moving into, tighter feature sizes, smaller and smaller geometries, packaging has become very, very critical. Just imagine the fact that if the semiconductor, and I make an analogy to a human being, if the semiconductor represents the brain, the packaging represents the body, right? So it provides the protection and brings other functions, right, to the chip. Then there's the memory devices. So memory was something that we had totally given up on. It wasn't very much activity going on in this space. We're kind of down to one memory-based company, which is called Micron Technology. But now that is becoming very, very critical because of all the data that has to be processed and stored. And so people are looking at, okay, I'm processing the data with the logic chip, but now I want to offload some of that to the memory devices and then bring it back to the logic chip. So it's a lot that's going on, in that regard. And then current generation and mature, sort of technologies that we want to make sure that we hold on to, right? And so again, there are legacy systems that need today's chips and the like. And so we want to make sure that we maintain that and that doesn't get lost. All right, we can go to the next slide. So also, in order to make these chips, right, you have to have the proper materials and equipment, right, as well as the facilities that they reside in. And so a key piece of this, is in the area of strengthening our supply chain. So if you guys remember, during the COVID era, there was a lot of issues as it related to supply chain. You couldn't get certain things. And so, when it hit, it wasn't, it really manifested itself in the auto industry, right? There were manufacturing lines that were shut down. Why? Because they could not get the semiconductors, for the engine control modules, infotainment systems. And so we don't want to have a repeat of that. Just imagine a line getting shut down because they could not get a 15-cent part. And so there have been, hopefully we learned a lot of lessons, and we're actually looking to make sure that does not happen again. And so there is a lot of work that's going on in terms of incentivizing a lot of the folks that actually make the materials as well as the equipment, because that's also a part of the supply chain. If a lot of the equipment, a lot of the materials, are shipped from overseas, right? And if you can't get the materials, you can't get the equipment, you can't make the chips. And so we really, really got to do a better job in terms of, the supply chain piece of it. So some of you guys may be in industrial engineering or, or have ties relative to industrial engineering. I know a lot of you all are doing the data sciences and the like. And so, how can we do a better job, as it relates to doing some of the predictions, as it relates to doing some of the digital twinning, and the like, where you have to have data and you have to create these these models. You can go to the next slide. So some of the program priorities as it relates to the CHIPS Act, as I talked about before, economic and national security, making the technology commercially viable, being financially sound, certainly having the technical feasibility and being, ready to go. Certainly the workforce development is going to be huge. And then, looking at the broader impacts. And when we talk about the broader impacts, we're talking about, all the other things that are ancillary to the semiconductor industry. So one fact that I'll leave you with that, for every one job that is created with from a semiconductor standpoint or semiconductor job, there's a 7x multiplier, that goes with it. And so it is, truly an opportunity. It's truly, critical, that we bring these sort of opportunities back to the U.S., as it will help to continue to grow our economy. All right, as well as ensure our security. All right, next slide, please. So one of the things that Congress and, folks at Commerce is really talking about is, how do we increase the opportunity and inclusion? And so there's a big focus right now in terms of driving that opportunity and inclusion for all America and STEM innovation. The two other speakers who are part of that you will be hearing from, we all attended a workshop or a kickoff meeting in DC about a month ago now. And one of the statements that was made by the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, is that it's all hands on deck, and so that means everybody, both the traditional and non-traditional communities, have to be able to contribute. We have to be able to do a better job at STEM, and we have to innovate. All right, deliver benefits to disadvantaged communities. So those of you that are affiliated with an HBCU, it's going to be incumbent of us to actually reach beyond the HBCUs as well as, into the communities that those HBCUs serve. All right, we can go to the next slide. I think I'm almost done here. So looking at what is a vision for success, certainly, strengthening our supply chain, advancing our leadership in this area. We cannot be dependent, on Asia for this. We can't be dependent on Europe. We have to do it here. And by the end of the decade, we need to have a very, very vibrant and secure, right, cluster of semiconductor packaging operations. All right, you go to the next slide. So basically what this slide just kind of dictates, there'll be all these funding opportunities, and we're kind of looking at, how do you go after the funds? And the Department of Commerce has kind of laid it out in terms of what makes sense from a partnering standpoint. And again, we are taking heed of this, as we start building out, our partners to actually compete for that 11 billion in R&D, as well as some of the other 39 billion that's going to be afforded, to the industry folks who need the workers, who need, the HBCUs, to make sure that there is a ready and willing workforce. You can go to R&D, you go to the next slide. In this regard, tools, innovation, collaboration, and workforce. These are the sort of things that people are looking for, building, new tools, increasing collaboration, having a workforce that's ready to hit the ground, and again, innovate, innovate, innovate. So some of you all in here may be aspiring entrepreneurs. There are going to be opportunities for startups, that will allow you to hit the market faster because they're actually, providing funds, for those startups that will have semiconductor related businesses. You can go to the next slide. So here are some of the challenges that they've kind of listed that we need to overcome. And again, how do we move things from lab to fab? How do we scale? How do we get things to the market quickly? And a lot of focus is going to be on prototyping and testing, making resources available to make this happen. And then, creating a rich learning ground, right, for innovation and education. And so we're hoping that HBCUs, will get on board with this. We're hoping that, people will get more interested, in the semiconductors and semiconductor packaging. It's one of the highest paid, on average, careers that, one can actually have. So a typical salary for a semiconductor engineer, is probably ranks, close to being number one, and so six-figure salaries, out the gate, just not, it's not something that's unheard of. All right, go to, and so I'm just going to kind of finish with this. They have set up a number of various organizations, right, that will be competed, whether it's what's called a National Semiconductor Technology Center, which is where all of these things will sit. National Advanced Packaging Manufacturing Program, which is currently being competed. A Manufacturing USA Institute, which will also be competed. And metrology being, characterization tools and things of that nature. So all of this, really adds up to, from an R&D standpoint, $11 billion, and $11 billion is just a drop in the bucket. So I expect as this goes further, that there will be more money that will be made available to this network. And so that concludes my talk in terms of what's happening with the CHIPS Act. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Our next presenter is Dr. Francis Williams, and you have a pop-up poll, everyone. So enjoy the poll, and Dr. Williams, take it away.
Yes, so I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Okay, did that come up right? Can you see the full screen okay?
Perfect. Well, if you swap presenter, hit display settings, and then swap presenter and presentation views.
Okay, so now is that right?
Perfect. Thanks so much. Awesome.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. As Dr. Washington mentioned, I am Dr. Francis Williams, the Vice President for Research and Sponsor Programs at Clark Atlanta University. And I've been asked to talk about chips. Like, what are they? And so my presentation today will give a little background about what integrated circuits are when we refer to them. So there are some very basic fundamental concepts that I will be covering, so that hopefully everyone will come around when you hear about the CHIPS work and research. You'll have an understanding of what chips are. And you may, again, chips are everywhere, so you may already have that understanding. So when we talk about microelectronic devices, one of the fundamental components is called the integrated circuit, or the IC. You may hear me say IC. And it's just an electronic circuit, miniaturized electronic circuit with tiny dimensions that are created on a microchip or chip. ICs are used in many facets of our everyday lives. They're in basically almost every electronic device. So as a consumer, we have chips all around us in our cell phones, in our cars, just all around us in our homes, in different devices, in our computers. And as I said, they're miniature electronic circuits. And so these components are actually integrated onto a semiconductor substrate. And ICs can contain transistors, resistors, capacitors, diodes, so electronic components. The first transistor was, if you're interested, the first transistor was constructed in 1947 at Bell Labs, whereas the first IC was made at Texas Instruments in 1958. So let's talk a little bit about integrated circuits in your computer. So this is a real basic description of switches and what transistors do. So your computers require on and off states or of switches to represent data. And mechanical switches, of course, are too slow and bulky. A non-mechanical switch that can be turned on and off electrically is required. So transistors can be used as non-mechanical switches made for semiconductor materials. They allow you to turn electrically on or off, stopping the current flow or allowing current flow. So for our semiconductor devices, silicon is the most popular material. And that's because it's relatively cheap, it's in great abundance. We could find it in sand at a beach. However, silicon does not conduct well. And so we have to introduce other materials to change and increase its conductivity. And so we call it a semiconductor. And it can be used to make transistors. So here is, I'm going a little electrical, my background, my PhD is in electrical engineering. So for those of you who may be students and have seen the discrete components that you actually have in your labs, you know, there are 3 components and, you know, it's a fairly big size, but those devices are too big and slow for what we need for our electronic devices. So we actually make these same devices by integrating them into semiconductor materials. And again, they can be switched from on to off quickly by applying the correct charge to do that. And so I'm not going to spend much time here, but again, you just want to know that transistors are switches, and by making them small, we can switch quickly, okay? So design of a chip. Each chip is designed to perform a specific task. So to make the chip process more info at faster speeds, more and smaller transistors are placed on the circuit. So why is that? And that's because for these smaller sizes that will now be closer together, we have data that's moving from one place to another faster, and it doesn't use as much space. So we can place a lot of these transistors on our wafer. So you'll see where we can have millions, even billions of transistors on a wafer. Also, how we design our chips and improve the design of chips, as we talk about things that are being looked at for research and development. So one is how to design these chips better so that they're faster, smaller. Also, we want to look at the materials that we actually create the chip from, because if we could optimize the properties of those materials, we can also have better performing chips. So all of that, some of that you heard Dr. White talk about in his previous, in the previous presentation, where we talk about R&D. These are some of the things being investigated. Okay, so just to look a little, go back a little, and to see how our processors have evolved. And again, that comes through research and development by, so we see if any of you had computers back in the 80s, that the Intel 386, if you remember 386 or 486, 386 only had 275,000 transistors. So again, the name of the game is smaller, cheaper, faster. And who is pushing that? That's us as the consumer. So we have electronics back in the day, as they say, that did a lot less. And that's because of that. Not as many circuits, basically, microchips that were able to perform. So you see, as the technology evolved and our processors in our computers we had more and they were more complex, you see these numbers and how they've grown. So all the way up until you see different fab companies have different processors, to even Apple. So if you have MacBooks or different Apple products, you know, they use their own processors now. And the Apple M1 from 2020 has 16 billion transistors. And that's why your computers, your phones are faster. They can do more. You could, you know, phones a long time ago could do two things. You could make a call and receive a call. And now you could watch videos, you could send emails, you could do all types of things. And that's because you have more chips and smaller features and more circuits that are performing them. And at the Apple M1 Ultra from 2022 has 114 billion transistors. This is just a quick view or image showing integrated circuits by generations and just how they've evolved and grow from small scale integration up to ultra large scale integration, where we have millions to billions of transistors per chip. So how do we create these chips? You heard Dr. White talk about fabs, fabrication facilities. So first we look at the system or the circuit design of that chip, the IC layout of the components, the photolithographic, and this is my area of mass preparation, and the fabrication of the IC chip. Okay, and so let's talk about size, just so make sure everybody has a clear understanding. When we talk about a strand of hair is anywhere from 60 to 100 micrometers or microns in diameter. So our current transistor technology is based on 5 nanometers, which is 0.005 micron. Process technology, and that refers to the feature sizes on the chip. Okay, and so as we look even at the evolution of the feature sizes, right? So starting all the way in the 50s, 120 micron, to where we are now, 0.005 micron. And again, this is the type of, this is why the research is important, because this allows us to create better chips that do more. So many chips can be fabricated at one time in a facility called a fab or clean room facility. They're mass produced on a semiconductor wafer. And again, they're created in this big lab. Clean rooms are used for fabricating devices, but they are very costly and complex. So you may be asking, why are they needed and why is there this big push to now have fabs, facilities back in the US? And that is one of the pushes with the CHIPS Act. And so we need these types of labs as we are developing chips, is because contamination can destroy integrated circuits. And again, that's because these devices have features that are so small. That's why I try to put it in context to a strand of hair and the feature sizes. So what are the sources? A lot of the contamination can come from us in dealing and working with them, or the researchers who are working and fabricating them. Could come from dust, from us, from hair, flakes on the skin, oil from fingers. And that's why we have these complex facilities where the air is filtered, the air pressure inside is slightly higher than outside. You have the workers or the researchers wearing these bunny suits, which you see a picture of me there in a bunny suit. Okay, and so I'm gonna end there, but I just wanted to give a little overview of what chips are and how we make them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for that insight. Next up, we have Dr. Keith Hargrove. Dr. Hargrove?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Washington, and thanks for all that are here in this seminar. Let me first thank Dr. White and Dr. Washington for excellent presentation. Dr. White mentioned really sharing with you this what is actually called the CHIPS and Science Act, which is an investment by the federal government in the billions of dollars because of the U.S. and its vulnerability with regard to integrated circuits. And so, as he shared with you, the federal government has made a decision that the U.S. is going to become more independent in producing these types of products that are used in everything, consumer goods as well as the military. And so this is a major bipartisan effort that was decided under the Biden administration to make that investment. And that's definitely a good thing. And Dr. Williams shared basically what is integrated circuits. And so what I like to appeal is really a call to action for the HBCUs. I do want to give a shout out to Dr. White because his effort, his leadership has led to what is called the HBCU CHIPS Network. That is a collection of HBCUs that have to really address this major challenge with regards to the CHIPS Act. Dr. White mentioned that about a month ago, we all met in Washington, D.C., and we had a number of industry sponsors, visitors there, along with about 15 HBCUs. And I must say, I want to give credit to a lot of these outstanding HBCUs because I was totally impressed by the resources and the labs that are at our institutions, whether that's Howard University, Norfolk State. I was really impressed by the lab facilities at Alabama A&M and Morgan State. So we have the capacity, we have the resources to train individuals at our HBCUs to make an impact and absolutely enter that workforce. So my appeal on behalf of Dr. White and Dr. Williams is a call to action for our HBCUs. And this is an effort to do just that. Many of you may not know that the U.S. only produces about 145,000 engineers per year, 145,000. And only about 6,000 of them are represented by people that look like me and maybe many that look like you. And so the question is, how do the HBCUs meet that demand? The Secretary of Commerce said that by 2030, there will be a need of 350,000 engineers and scientists to work in the semiconductor field. The goal is to double the production from all the colleges and universities, as well as for individuals that are underrepresented. And that is a tremendous opportunity for HBCUs. And so the question and the challenge is that how do the HBCUs respond literally to that opportunity? So the meeting that we had in early February was just that. And there was a call to do three things. One, the HBCUs shared their capabilities, what kind of resources that they have, what type of curricula that they have. Most of that was centered in electrical and computer engineering, but many of them, a few had clean labs. Their electrical engineering programs that focus in electronics and semiconductors, outstanding facilities as well. And basically, it was an opportunity to share what these institutions have. The next challenge, number two, is if we are to address the opportunities for the CHIPS Act, how do we collaborate as a group, and what does that infrastructure look like? Dr. White has challenged us with this HBCU CHIPS network to come up with a consortium or an alliance whereby we could collaborate and look for opportunities, funding opportunities that we all can benefit from. Now, some of our HBCUs are doing an incredible job with research activities, but this is a call, this is an ask that this is not an individual institution initiative. We want to encourage collaboration to pursue these billions of dollars of resources that's available, because it will directly and indirectly impact the students that are on this call, other students that are at our HBCUs. We want to be able to prepare, train, and educate our students to enter this workforce where there's a tremendous need. And so as this workforce continue to expand for the next decade, if not more, how will we as HBCUs respond to that? And so this is a call to action to the deans of the colleges of engineering, to the VPs of research and sponsored programs, even to the provosts and presidents of our HBCUs, to respond to this tremendous opportunity by this investment as a way of by the CHIPS and Science Act. We believe we can do this strategically, and this is an awesome opportunity that we can collaborate and do this together. So I'm going to end that there on the interest of time, Dr. Washington, and provide an opportunity for us to entertain some questions.
Wonderful. And I believe the results of the poll will be coming up rather quickly. And so thank you all for your wonderful and interesting remarks. And so for today, 91% of participants today are graduating or working professionals. We have a few students, and the majority of the attendees are not students. And thank you, Dr. Morris, for putting those links in the chat. Check out the chat for opportunities there. And we asked, where do you currently live? 68% live in Georgia and 32% are not in Georgia. So welcome to the A, as what they say down here. And when was the first semiconductor developed? I think Dr. Williams said it in her remarks. It was 1947, and 71% of the people said 1947. So we have a majority, at least 71%. Yeah, are right on it. So good job. These questions are fun. Which country currently produces the most semiconductors? Interesting. 3 people said the United States. 7 people said China. It's Taiwan. So 52%, 11 people said responded with Taiwan. So yes, Taiwan produces the most semiconductors. So fantastic. So at this time, I'm going to ask our panelists to, if they are able, to turn on their cameras. And there's some questions that have been placed in the chat. And thank you, Dr. White, for responding it. So somebody just said, what was the cause of the US decreasing 11% of chip manufacturing? And what did Taiwan do to be in position to manufacture 45% of chips? I mean, They've only been around for what, 25,000 years, right? So what did they do? What's going on in Taiwan that's not happening here? And what's the urgency all about?
So what happened in Taiwan is the fact that they had forced
Dr. White, we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
So if I may, let me try to answer.
to make the investment in the semiconductor.
Dr. White, we're having a hard time hearing you. Dr. Hargrove, what say you?
Yeah.
Space.
Yeah. So if decades ago, there was a shift in the whole. There was a shift in the whole manufacturing capabilities in the U.S. So televisions, electronics.
He's still going. Tommy, are you able to mute Dr.
The
White?
government and the entrepreneurs that were there had the foresight to make those investments.
All right, go ahead, Dr. Hargrove.
Yeah. So about a little, probably 20 years ago, if not longer.
Can you hear me?
No, we cannot hear you. So let's let Dr. Hargrove answer the question.
Gosh.
So during the 1980s, there was a major shift in manufacturing across the U.S. It was actually stimulated mainly by labor costs. And so
okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay, 1 second, Dr. White.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. 1 second. Let's let Dr. Hargrove finish. Go ahead, Dr. Hargrove.
So in the late 80s, there was a major shift in manufacturing production. So a lot of consumer products, even automobiles, shifted to other countries, but primarily due to labor costs. Electronics was one of them. And so as a result, many microelectronics were done overseas, and it was Taiwan primarily, based on some of the emerging technologies, decided to make an investment in that, and so did China. And so the unfortunate thing is that made the United States more vulnerable to that. And not only in terms of consumer products, but also the military as well. But the good thing is we finally, shall we say, woke up and recognized the need to do that. And so this major investment, it will actually be, Dr. Washington, probably close to $400 billion over a period of time. And so hopefully, not only industry, the different entities of the federal government, as well as academic universities, research labs, they will all take part in trying to address and get back that major industry.
Fantastic. And so somebody said, question from the NSF, would it be okay to share a recent NSF includes funding opportunity related to broadening participation in microelectronics in the full meeting chat? Yes, y'all are welcome to put items and information and share that, and we'd be happy to share that more broadly. Thank you, Dr. Tori Smith, for that. That's fantastic. It's always good to have those opportunities. So Dr. Williams, what degrees should be pursued for those who want to go into this field? And are those programs being offered at HBCUs, or what should we be doing to prepare our students to really enter into this evolving landscape?
Sure. So I actually have a slide that I didn't, some more slides. I was trying to make sure I stayed to my 10 minutes that talked about the fields in these areas. So when I say microelectronics, there's also optoelectronics, which is in this field too. So if we're talking about fields that, and it's very interdisciplinary field. So when we talk about semiconductor device theory, that could be physics, that could be electrical engineering, When we look at the areas that may be characterizing, growing, and synthesizing new materials, that's going to be material science engineering. It could be chemical engineering. It could be chemistry. It could be physics. It could be electrical engineering.
Don't forget
even optics.
mechanical.
And mechanical, yes, mechanical's in there too. You're on my chart, but you're right. You should be there too. For the design of devices, that could be a number of fields too. Mechanical, electrical, chemical, and these are all engineering. Could be chemistry, material sciences, and engineering. Fabrication as well, those same same disciplines. Then we also have another area that's just looking at analyzing and modeling structures and devices. So that could be physics, mechanical, electrical. And then we have disciplines that may look at improving and developing electronic packages. And so that could be electrical, material science, chemical, mechanical. So very interdisciplinary. You could be working in this field from a number of disciplines.
It brings me back to my pharmaceutical packaging internship days where I worked on the plant floor and I was a math major. So, you know,
Yes.
It's really going to be an all hands on deck to really push this national initiative. And I remember when we were in DC, somebody said that this is the previous big thing in comparison to this was the launch of the World Wide Web. So we can think of this being as that magnitude. And I always encourage all my team members, I'll encourage everybody on here, on your bedside table, you should have the CHIPS and Science Act and have that as a nightly reading. And yes, read the legislation. It's a great call there. Dr. White, were you able to get your sound back? Did you want to respond? Share some last words?
No, I think guys did a great job, you know, in answering the question. So I would just go to the sentiment, you know, that Dr. Hargrove, Dr. Williams, you know, have made that, again, you know, using the Secretary of Commerce, her words, you know, it's all hands on deck. And it's a great opportunity for us. It's a great opportunity for HBCUs in our community. So hopefully we can get more people interested and spread the word and get engaged. So thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you all for this really informative panel. There's going to be a lot of opportunities as we go forward. I did put the legislation bill in the chat. I encourage people to read these things. They're actually, I enjoy them. And so with that, thank you, Dr. Hargrove, thank you, Dr. White, and thank you, Dr. Williams, for sharing with us about this really innovative chips that will be coming, not potato chips, but semiconductors and all the good joys around there. It's exciting time, and we look forward to continue engaging with you all. And we appreciate the call to action. We're ready, able, and willing, and it's going to be fun.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Dr. Washington, that whole AUC, the data science. Appreciate this invitation and look forward to doing more.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye.